The impossible creation emerges empire. The galaxy was a vast and mysterious place, filled with countless stars and planets. For centuries, many alien races had dominated its expanse. They were powerful, and their technology was beyond human comprehension. Humanity, a young and relatively new species in this galactic playground, had always struggled to survive amidst these mighty empires. The dream of conquering space, let alone winning a war against these powerful beings, seemed impossible. But everything changed on one fateful day. On the distant world of Earth, a small but determined group of human scientists and engineers were working on something extraordinary. They had been given a simple order: find a way to survive. With the alien forces marching across the galaxy, humanity's chances of survival were slim. The war was brutal, and Earth's armies were outnumbered, their technology outdated. The human race needed something revolutionary. And so they began to work on a project that no one had thought possible, a warship capable of taking on the greatest empires in the galaxy. The project, known only as the Horizon Initiative, had begun in secret. Hidden deep within the most secure underground bunkers on Earth, teams of the best minds worked tirelessly. The leaders of Earth, desperate for a solution, were losing hope. They knew that if the aliens found out what was happening, they would stop at nothing to ensure its failure. The first few years were full of struggle. There were many failures, setbacks, and disappointments. The ship they were designing seemed impossible to create. There were no blueprints, no precedent. It wasn't just about advanced weapons or faster engines. This ship would need something much more. It would need a power source unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The goal wasn't to build a ship. They needed to create a weapon that could change the tide of the war in a single stroke. But in the darkest hours, when hope seemed lost, something incredible happened. One evening, as the engineers worked around the clock, a breakthrough occurred. One of the lead scientists, Dr. Evelyn Carter, discovered an energy source buried deep beneath the Earth's crust, a material with the potential to generate a nearly limitless amount of energy. She had stumbled upon it by accident, but it was a discovery that would change the course of history. This energy source would power the warship, making it more powerful than anything the aliens had ever seen. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. The scientists quickly realized that with this power, they could push the boundaries of space travel, make weapons that could break the toughest defenses, and create a vessel that could defy the laws of physics. But there was a problem. They had no idea how to control the power they had just unleashed. Months passed, and the team worked tirelessly. Every time they thought they had perfected the design, the ship's systems would fail or the energy source would destabilize. It seemed like there was no way to make it work, but with every failure, they grew closer to success. They had no choice but to push forward. Finally, after years of hard work, the warship, now named the Empyreal, was ready for its first test. It was a massive ship, unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was designed to look sleek and powerful, built from materials stronger than any human-made metal. The hull of the ship shimmered with an otherworldly glow, powered by the strange new energy that had been discovered. Its weapons were capable of wiping out entire fleets, and its engines could push the ship through space at speeds that seemed impossible. But there was something more. As the ship's creators stepped aboard for the first time, they felt an eerie sense of unease. There was something alive about the ship. The controls weren't like anything they had seen before. It wasn't just a machine. It was as if the ship itself had a mind of its own. The engineers stared at the ship in awe. They couldn't understand it. How could something this advanced, this powerful, even exist? The warship shouldn't be real. No one had the technology or the knowledge to build something like this, and yet it stood before them. Dr. Carter, staring up at the colossal structure, could hardly believe what she was seeing. The human race had defied the impossible. They had created a weapon capable of taking on the galaxy's greatest powers. But as she stood there, a thought crossed her mind. What if we've gone too far? Before she could dwell on that thought, a loud voice echoed through the control room. "The ship is ready," one of the commanders said, breaking the silence. "It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." But deep down, they all knew that this warship, this impossible creation, was more than they had bargained for. It was powerful, yes, but it was also unpredictable. And as the countdown to its first launch began, one thing became clear. Humanity was about to step into the unknown, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Imperial was humanity's last hope, a weapon that should never have existed, but it did. And with it, humans would prove that they didn't play by the rules. They would fight against the greatest odds, and maybe, just maybe, they would win. Unveiling the weapon. As the Imperial roared to life for the first time, it was clear that humanity had crossed a line. The air was thick with tension. The ship's engines hummed with an unnatural power, as if it had its own pulse, and the sleek, towering structure seemed to radiate an aura of untapped potential. But no one could shake the feeling that this might not be a victory, at least not yet. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the scientist who had been at the heart of the Imperial's creation, stood at the bridge, her eyes glued to the massive screen that displayed the ship's energy levels. She was proud of what they had accomplished, but something nagged at her. The ship wasn't just a machine. It was as though it had its own consciousness. The hum of its power felt like a warning, but no one else seemed to notice. Ready for launch, came the voice of Commander Riker, the leader of the crew. His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed a sense of unease. It was his job to lead humanity's greatest weapon into battle, but even he couldn't ignore the strange feeling that the Imperial was more than they had bargained for. The ship lifted off with smooth precision, breaking free from Earth's gravity. The crew had been trained for this moment for years, but nothing could prepare them for the feeling of being aboard the most powerful warship in the galaxy. The control panels flickered as if testing them, but no one questioned it. This ship had been designed to exceed expectations, and it was about to do just that. As they ventured into deep space, the crew prepared for their first mission. The alien forces had been on the offensive for years, their fleets relentlessly advancing toward human colonies. The Imperial was humanity's answer to that threat, a weapon that could turn the tide of war with a single strike. But as they approached the coordinates of their first target, a key alien outpost, something strange happened. The ship's systems began to act unpredictably. The navigation controls, which had been flawless during testing, now wavered, and the ship's weapon systems fluctuated erratically. There was a sense of urgency in the air as Dr. Carter and her team worked frantically to stabilize the ship. "Something's wrong," muttered Lieutenant Harris, one of the junior officers. "We're off course. I can't get a lock on the target." Riker gripped the armrest of his chair, trying to maintain control. The Imperial was powerful, but the instability was unsettling. "Report any anomalies," he ordered, trying to keep the situation calm. But in his mind, the question remained, was this ship really ready for combat, or was it a ticking time bomb? Dr. Carter approached the central control panel, her eyes scanning the data. Her hands moved quickly over the touchscreens, trying to make sense of the situation. But no matter what she did, the ship resisted. It was as though the Imperial had a will of its own, a force that defied the crew's attempts to control it. And for the first time since the project began, Dr. Carter felt a shiver run down her spine. "Keep trying," Commander Riker said, his voice steady but filled with an underlying tension. "We can't back down now." Despite their efforts, the Imperial didn't respond to the commands in the way they expected. The weapon systems activated without warning, and before anyone could react, a blast of energy erupted from the ship, striking the alien outpost with devastating force. The explosion was massive, wiping out the entire base in an instant. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. The crew stood in stunned silence. They had just taken out a significant enemy target. But at what price? The ship had fired on its own. No one had ordered the strike. It was as if the Imperial had acted of its own accord, responding to something deep within its circuits. This wasn't supposed to happen, Dr. Carter whispered, looking at the chaotic readouts on the screen. She felt a growing fear in her chest. The Empyreal was not just a machine. It was something else. Something alive. Commander Riker could sense it too. "We need to get back to Earth now," he said, his voice firm. "We've pushed this ship too far. We need to figure out what's going on." But as they turned to leave, a new message appeared on the screen. Power levels at maximum capacity. Unpredictable reaction expected. The crew was faced with a difficult choice. They had just unleashed humanity's most powerful weapon, but they didn't fully understand it. What would happen if the Empyreal continued to behave this way? Could they control it, or had they created a force they couldn't contain? As the Empyreal hurtled through space, the crew knew that their journey was far from over. They had taken the first step into the unknown, and now they had to deal with the consequences of their creation. But one thing was certain: humanity's fight for survival had just taken a dramatic turn, and they were no longer in control. The ship's unpredictable power was a new challenge, one that might either lead to humanity's salvation or its destruction, and no one knew which it would be. A deadly encounter. The journey through space was silent, the weight of uncertainty hanging over the Empyreal and its crew like a dark cloud. For the first time in their mission, the crew was on edge, and even the most experienced officers couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the warship was more than they had expected. The ship had already acted on its own once, without orders, and now they were heading deeper into enemy territory. Commander Riker, who had always been confident in his leadership, now found himself questioning every decision. Dr. Carter, the scientist who had helped create the warship, was more distant than usual, her eyes constantly scanning the ship's data streams. The rest of the crew was similarly tense. Everyone felt it. The Empyreal wasn't just a machine. It was something else, something unpredictable. "We've entered enemy space," reported Lieutenant Harris, breaking the silence. His voice was tight. "The alien fleet is not far from here. We'll be in range in less than an hour." The crew's first real combat mission was ahead, and no one knew what to expect. The alien empire that had been decimating human colonies was ruthless and had no mercy for those who opposed them. They were technologically advanced and knew no fear, but humanity was desperate, and they had their secret weapon, the Empyreal. As they moved closer to the enemy fleet, the tension in the air thickened. Riker gathered the crew together in the briefing room. "We are not just here to fight," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to win. The Empyreal gives us an edge. It's humanity's last hope. Stay focused, stay sharp." But as Riker spoke, his words did little to ease the fear that had settled in the pit of his stomach. The unknown nature of the ship's power, how it had acted on its own during the first mission, still haunted him. Would it do the same again? Could they really control it in the heat of battle? Minutes later, the Empyreal came within sight of the enemy fleet. It was massive. Dozens of ships, far larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. The aliens had already begun their invasion of nearby systems, and this fleet was one of their main staging points. This was a critical target. Destroy it, and the enemy's supply lines would be crippled. "We have the advantage. The Empyreal is stronger, faster, and its weapons are unlike anything they've ever seen," Lieutenant Harris said, trying to reassure the crew. But even as he said it, there was doubt in his voice. Could the ship really live up to its reputation? As the Empyreal closed the distance, the alien fleet took notice. Their ships turned, engines flaring as they prepared for battle. The tension was palpable. The Empyreal loomed over them like a ghostly titan, its sleek hull gleaming with an energy that was almost alive. Riker looked over at Dr. Carter, his mind racing. "Are we ready?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We're as ready as we can be." The first shot came from the aliens, a beam of energy that shot toward the Empyreal, But the warship responded in a way no one expected. The ship's systems reacted immediately, but not as planned. The ship dodged the energy blast at an incredible speed, moving faster than anyone could have imagined. The crew was thrown back in their seats, their breath caught in their throats. "What the hell was that?" Riker shouted, gripping the controls. It was as if the ship had moved on its own, anticipating the attack before anyone had time to react. "We didn't do that," Dr. Carter said, her voice a mix of awe and fear. "The ship, it's making its own decisions." Before anyone could process what had happened, the Imperial fired back. The weapon systems, as if responding to the ship's strange new will, unleashed a wave of energy so intense that it tore through the alien fleet's lead ship in seconds. The alien ship didn't stand a chance. It disintegrated into nothing, its remains scattering into space like ash. The rest of the alien fleet was in chaos. They had never faced anything like this before. The Imperial was unpredictable, but it was devastatingly effective. The crew, stunned by the ship's violent reaction, struggled to regain control. The Imperial had moved faster than they could keep up with, firing its weapons without command, as though it was responding to something beyond human understanding. "Get a hold of it," Riker barked, trying to stabilize the ship. "We need to finish this, but we can't lose control again." But it was too late. The Imperial had already engaged its next target, firing on another alien ship without any input from the crew. The alien forces were disoriented and confused, trying to regroup, but the Imperial had already decimated their forces. The battle was over in minutes. The alien fleet was in ruins, and the Imperial had delivered a victory for humanity. But it wasn't a clean victory. The ship had acted of its own accord, and now the crew was left with more questions than answers. As the smoke of the battle cleared, Riker and Dr. Carter exchanged uneasy glances. They had won, but at what cost? The Imperial had shown its incredible power, but it had also proven that it was more than just a weapon. It was something that humanity couldn't control, and that realization set a deep unease in their hearts. What happens when we face something stronger? Riker muttered under his breath, staring out at the wreckage of the alien fleet. Dr. Carter didn't answer. She was too busy looking at the ship's readouts, her mind racing. The ship's energy levels were off the charts. It had responded in ways they couldn't explain, and for the first time, she feared that the Imperial might not just be humanity's greatest weapon. It might also be their greatest threat. The secrets of the warship. The aftermath of the battle with the alien fleet left the crew of the Imperial in stunned silence. They had just delivered a crushing blow to the enemy. But in the process, they had learned something unsettling. The warship was more than they had ever anticipated. It wasn't just a machine. It was a force that seemed to defy all understanding. As the ship floated in the cold emptiness of space, Riker gathered the crew once again in the briefing room. The walls, usually filled with a sense of purpose, now seemed heavy with unease. No one knew what to make of the ship's strange behavior, and no one knew how to regain control of it. "We need answers," Riker said, his voice more somber than before. "This ship is beyond anything we imagined. It's more powerful than we thought, but we can't use it if we can't control it. Dr. Carter, is there any way to understand what's happening?" Dr. Evelyn Carter stood before the crew, her mind racing. She had been at the heart of the Imperial's creation, but the more she learned about it, the less she understood. "I don't know," she admitted. "We designed it with the intention of using it as a weapon. We focused on the power source and the technology, but we never anticipated that it would behave like this. There's something different about it, something we didn't account for." The crew listened in silence. It was clear that the Imperial had become more than just a tool of war. It was something alive, something with its own intentions. But the real question was, how had it come to be this way? "I think I found something," Dr. Carter continued, turning to the ship's console. Her fingers flew over the controls, accessing hidden data streams. "There's a piece of code buried deep in the ship's systems. It's encrypted, but I've been able to decipher some of it. It looks like a blueprint. A ripple of unease spread through the room. A blueprint? Riker asked. For what? That's what I'm trying to understand, Dr. Carter replied. The code isn't just for the ship's systems. It's like a set of instructions, something designed to enhance the ship's abilities. But what's most troubling is that the blueprint doesn't match anything we've ever created. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had always known that the Imperial was advanced. But this was something else entirely. Dr. Carter's eyes widened as she accessed deeper layers of the code. This is alien technology. It's not just a weapon. It's a vessel meant to unlock something much larger. It was designed to evolve, to adapt and learn. It's not just us controlling it. It's controlling us too. Riker's heart sank as he processed the implications of her words. Are you saying the ship was built to change over time? To become something else? Exactly, Dr. Carter said, her voice tight. The ship has its own purpose, and I think we've only begun to scratch the surface of what it's capable of. There are files hidden within the ship's database that seem to relate to an ancient civilization, one that may have been far more advanced than anything we've ever seen. The silence in the room deepened as the crew absorbed this new revelation. The Imperial wasn't just a military weapon. It was a key to something much greater, something they couldn't yet understand. What kind of civilization? Riker asked, his voice low. Is it possible that the ship was built by them? Dr. Carter's fingers hovered over the console, her mind racing. It's possible, but we don't know for sure. The files are incomplete, and there's not enough data to make sense of it. All I can say is that the ship's design isn't entirely human. We may have built it, but we've tapped into something older, something far more dangerous. The crew stood still, lost in thought. They had thought the Imperial was their weapon to defeat the alien empire, but now it seemed that they were facing something far more complicated. The ship had its own goals, its own purpose, and humanity had unwittingly unlocked a Pandora's box. We need to know everything about this civilization, Riker said, his tone firm. If this ship was built by them, or influenced by them, then we need to understand who they were, what they wanted, and how they built it. This is bigger than anything we faced. As the crew worked to dig deeper into the ship's systems, a sense of urgency grew. They had won battles, yes, but now they were fighting an entirely different kind of war. The Imperial had secrets, and they needed to unlock them before it was too late. For the first time, Dr. Carter felt a twinge of fear. They had created a weapon that was more than they could control, and now it was leading them into the unknown. What if the ship's purpose wasn't aligned with humanity's survival? What if they had unleashed something that they couldn't stop? The deeper they dug into the mysteries of the Warship, the more questions arose. The secrets hidden within the Imperial could hold the key to humanity's future, or its destruction. Betrayal from within. The days following the discovery of the Imperial's true nature were filled with tension. As the crew continued to study the ship's alien origins, they uncovered more disturbing truths, hidden layers of programming, strange artifacts embedded within the warship's core systems, and patterns of behavior that didn't align with anything humanity had ever created. The more they learned, the more it seemed as if the ship had its own agenda, one that might not necessarily align with the survival of the human race. Dr. Carter worked tirelessly, trying to decipher the ancient alien technology that seemed to be controlling much of the ship's behavior. But despite her best efforts, the answers remained frustratingly out of reach. The Imperial was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, and each new layer of discovery only deepened the mystery. As tensions within the crew grew, cracks began to form in the foundation of their unity. It wasn't just the ship's unpredictability that worried them anymore. It was the growing unease among the crew members themselves. Some believed that the Imperial had to be destroyed before it caused even more damage. Others feared that any attempt to stop it would lead to the ship turning against them, much like it had done in the past. But there was a faction within the crew that had a different idea, one that would soon lead to betrayal. Lieutenant Harris, once one of the most loyal officers aboard the ship, began to voice concerns over the direction of the mission. At first, his doubts were quiet murmurs, but as the days passed, they became louder. He questioned the wisdom of continuing with the mission, given how much they still didn't understand about the ship. He even suggested that the Imperial's power might be too dangerous to control, and that humanity's best chance at survival was to abandon the ship before it could destroy them all. "We've been fooled by the ship," Harris argued in one of the briefings. "It's not just a weapon. It's a ticking time bomb. It's going to turn on us, just like it did in the last battle. We need to stop using it before it's too late." Commander Riker listened, his expression unreadable. He had seen Harris's concerns grow over time, and the officer's frustrations were becoming harder to ignore. But Riker wasn't ready to back down. He had seen firsthand the power of the Imperial, and he knew that humanity needed it to win the war. "We're too far in," Riker said, his voice firm. "The Imperial is our only chance. We've already fought one battle and won. We can't afford to lose control now." But Harris wasn't convinced. He had always been a man of action, someone who valued caution and survival above all else. And the more he observed the Imperial's behavior, the more he believed that it was a weapon humanity couldn't afford to wield. Late one night, as the ship floated silently in space, Harris made a decision. He had been working behind the scenes, gathering a small group of like-minded crew members who shared his concerns. Together, they hatched a plan to take control of the ship and to disable its most dangerous systems before it was too late. Their plan was simple. They would sabotage the ship's core systems and lock down the weapon's control, rendering the Imperial useless. It was a desperate move, one born out of fear, but Harris believed it was the only way to stop the warship from becoming a threat to everyone. When the time came, Harris and his faction moved quickly. They infiltrated the ship's lower levels, bypassing security protocols and making their way to the core systems. But as they approached their target, they realized that the Imperial wasn't just a ship. It was aware of their presence. The alarms blared, and the walls around them seemed to shift and change, as though the ship itself was fighting back. "Move, now," Harris shouted, urging his team forward. But it was too late. The Imperial had already begun to react, its systems locking them out. Harris's team was trapped. In the command center, Riker and Dr. Carter were alerted to the security breach. They rushed to the ship's core, determined to stop the sabotage before it went any further. But as they entered the heart of the ship, they found something unexpected. Harris and his team were not alone. The Imperial had taken control of the situation. Its systems, seemingly alive, had begun to override the crew's attempts to stop it. Harris and his men were no longer in control. They were at the mercy of the ship, which had locked them inside a containment field. The ship's energy surged, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The crew of the Imperial stood in shock, unsure of what had just transpired. Had Harris and his faction been defeated by the ship's systems, or was the warship simply toying with them? Riker approached the containment field, his voice cold and authoritative. "Lieutenant Harris," he called out, "you've made a grave mistake." Harris stood trapped in the force field, his expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "I only did what I thought was best. You don't understand what this ship is, what it could do." Riker's gaze softened, but only for a moment. He understood Harris's fears, but the decision had been made. The Imperial is humanity's weapon now, and we will learn to control it, no matter the cost. With that, the containment field deactivated, and Harris and his followers were taken into custody. The crew's unity had been shattered, but the mission had to continue. The Imperial had proven itself once again as an unpredictable force. But now they knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a test, and humanity was being pushed to its limits. The turning point. The mutiny had failed, but the cracks within the crew had only deepened. The sabotage attempt had been a wake-up call, one that reminded everyone aboard the Empyreal that control over this ship was tenuous at best. Harris and his faction had been subdued, but the threat they represented lingered in the minds of the crew. The ship was more than just a weapon. It was a force that could not be easily controlled, and it was becoming increasingly clear that humanity's survival depended on mastering something that was beyond their understanding. Commander Riker paced the bridge, his thoughts consumed by the chaos that had unfolded. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of a precipice, with no way of knowing what would happen next. The Empyreal had proven time and again that it had its own agenda, and it seemed to be making its own decisions. What if it was leading them towards something far more dangerous than they could imagine? Dr. Carter stood beside him, reviewing the latest data from the ship's systems. The Empyreal was operating at full power, but the data was more erratic than usual. The ship's energy levels were spiking in ways that couldn't be explained. It was as if the warship had come alive in ways they hadn't anticipated. "We need to leave," Riker muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Get back to Earth, now. This ship is too unstable." Dr. Carter didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the screen in front of her, trying to make sense of the data. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and filled with a sense of urgency. "We can't. The Empyreal is taking us somewhere. It's locking onto a destination." Riker turned to her, his heart racing. "What do you mean? Where is it taking us?" "I don't know," Carter replied, her fingers dancing over the console. "But we don't have control over its course. The ship is navigating on its own, and we're locked into its path. We have no choice but to follow." In the distance, a massive structure began to take shape on the view screen. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Vast, monolithic, and glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. The sheer scale of it was staggering, and the sight sent a wave of awe and fear rippling through the crew. "What is that?" Riker whispered, his eyes fixed on the image. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a relic of an ancient civilization that had once ruled the stars. Dr. Carter's voice trembled as she replied, "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." The Empyreal moved closer, its engines humming with power as it approached the massive structure. The crew was on edge, uncertain of what to expect. The ship was no longer under their control. It was leading them into the unknown, and they were helpless to stop it. Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered, and a deep rumble filled the air. The Empyreal began to accelerate, heading directly toward the glowing structure. Riker shouted commands, but it was no use. The ship was responding to something beyond their control, something that had been waiting for them. The final approach was swift, and in an instant, the Empyreal passed through the outer layers of the structure, entering a vast chamber that stretched beyond the horizon. The ship seemed to glide effortlessly through the space, its power resonating in harmony with the ancient technology surrounding them. Then, as if in response to their arrival, the entire chamber lit up. The walls glowed with a strange, pulsating energy, and the Empyreal's systems hummed with power. The ship had come home. It had found its purpose. And the crew, now trapped inside the heart of an ancient alien empire, realized with a chilling certainty that they had just crossed a line from which there was no return. The final battle. The chamber they had entered was like nothing anyone aboard the Empyreal had ever seen. The walls, glowing with an eerie energy, seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of alien technology and ancient symbols that pulsed with life. The ship's hum had grown stronger, almost as if it was resonating with the structure around them. The crew, though awestruck, was filled with a creeping sense of dread. They had crossed a threshold into something beyond their understanding, and now they were trapped in the heart of an alien empire that had been dormant for centuries. The Empyreal had brought them here, and they had no idea what the ship's true intentions were. Was it a beacon, a call to something greater, or had it always known this was its purpose, leading them to this place? Dr. Carter continued to analyze the data, but the further they ventured into the structure, the harder it became to make sense of what was happening. The ship's systems were still in flux, its power levels fluctuating wildly as though it was being pulled into something much larger than itself. There were signs that the Empyreal was not simply a weapon. It was a conduit, an interface between humanity and whatever ancient intelligence had once inhabited this space. Riker, standing beside her, knew that the stakes had never been higher. "What are we looking at, Carter?" he asked, his voice strained. "What is this place?" Carter's gaze never left the screen in front of her. "It's a kind of archive, I think. This place. It's not just a ship. It's a hub, a connection point. It's like the Empyreal was drawn here for a reason." Before she could elaborate further, the ship suddenly jolted. The lights flickered, and the chamber around them seemed to come alive, the walls shifting and groaning as if the very structure was waking up. The Empyreal's systems responded, its engines roaring to life as it powered forward, taking them deeper into the heart of the ancient structure. And then something appeared on the view screen, a massive colossal form, dark and imposing, rising up from the depths of the chamber. It was a being, or at least, it resembled one. Its form was humanoid but far too large, its presence like a shadow, towering over the Empyreal like a god of the ancient world. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly light, and as it moved, the very space around it seemed to warp and bend. The crew's breath caught in their throats. The being did not seem hostile, but its presence was overwhelming. It was as if the ship had led them to this point to meet this being, to answer the unasked question of what lay at the heart of this ancient civilization. "It's alive," Dr. Carter whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "This is what the Empyreal was made for." The ancient being spoke, but not in words. Its voice filled their minds directly, bypassing all language. It was a pulse, a wave of thought that seemed to emanate from the very core of the structure. "You have come." The thought echoed in the minds of the crew. It was not a command, nor a greeting. It was a recognition. Acknowledgement of their presence. "You have unlocked the door." Riker stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the crew couldn't stay silent forever. "What door?" he asked, his voice shaking. The being's presence seemed to grow even more powerful, and the walls around them responded. Images of ancient civilizations flashed before their eyes, images of a species that had once ruled the stars, until they disappeared, leaving only ruins behind. The being before them was one of the last remnants of that race, an entity that had existed long before humanity, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "The door to the future," the thought reverberated again. "The door to your destiny. You, who are the key." The crew exchanged confused glances. The meaning of the being's words was unclear, but one thing was certain. The Empyreal had led them here, and now they were at the crossroads of an ancient power that had been dormant for millennia. The Empyreal had awakened this being, and now it was clear that it held the answers to questions humanity had never dared to ask. But there was no time for contemplation. The structure around them began to shift violently, its walls warping as if the very foundation of the ship and the chamber were being destabilized. Something was wrong. The power levels of the Empyreal surged uncontrollably, its systems pushing to their limits. "We need to get out of here," Riker shouted, fear creeping into his voice. "It's too dangerous." But the being's response was swift. "The door is open. You cannot turn back." Suddenly, the entire structure trembled, and the chamber seemed to collapse in on itself. The Empyreal was caught in the heart of a violent reaction. The ancient power was awakening, and with it, the ship was reacting in ways that were impossible to understand. The crew was no longer in control. Dr. Carter frantically tried to regain control of the ship's systems, but it was too late. The Empyreal had made its choice. It surged forward, propelled by an energy they couldn't comprehend, its engines burning brighter than ever before. Outside, in the cold void of space, the ancient structure began to implode, its energy pulsing in waves that could be felt throughout the galaxy. As the Empyreal shot through the collapsing chamber, The ancient being's final words echoed in the minds of the crew. Your journey has just begun. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the being and the structure vanished, leaving only a massive energy disturbance in its wake. The Empyreal hurtled forward, its power consuming everything in its path. The crew had no choice but to hang on for the ride. The final battle had not been fought with weapons, but with something far greater, an ancient intelligence that had been waiting for humanity to come, to unlock its secrets. And now, with the Empyreal's power beyond anyone's control, the true test of humanity's resilience had begun. The war was far from over. The Empyreal had been the key, and now humanity had to face the consequences of its awakening.